Today I am chatting with Liz Graham all the way from California. So welcome. Thank you for giving me your time. And why don't you just kick off just by telling us where you live in, where you're from originally?
Ooh, I'm from Michigan, northern Michigan. Okay. And when I went to the University of Michigan in southern Michigan, nobody knew where my hometown of Harbor Springs was. So I would just sort of say north of. But now it's a really popular destination. Everybody knows where it is. But it was very small, like 2,000 people when I grew up, and everybody knew everybody. I was in the largest graduating class, 60 people from the high school. So, but I always knew I wanted to go to dental hygiene, and I'd worked with my dad as a dental assistant. So I went to hygiene school, and then in Ann Arbor is where I met Klaus Lang. And Klaus was a connection for many of us to go and work in Switzerland. So that was my first dental hygiene job, was in Bern, Switzerland.
So you better explain to people watching who Klaus Lang is.
Oh, my goodness. Maybe they know his name is Klaus Lang. Klaus was studying periodontics at the University of Michigan, and then he made a connection with Procter & Gamble while he was there. And so he came back to Switzerland and was doing live studies with chlorhexidine. So that was the hot rod new thing on the block then. And so he was really active in having study groups for us and what have you. So Klaus was really instrumental in a lot of us getting over there, especially from the University of Michigan, and then being there. And he also made it a lot more fun to be there. He had, like I say, the study groups, and gave everybody a chance to learn that way. And then I came back to Michigan. And
can I just stop you there for a sec? So how long was you in Switzerland for?
3.5 years.
And so were you living in Bern near?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Just a little bit outside of Bern and Gumligen. Yeah. I always thought that was a cute name. Yeah. So I took the little train every morning and worked right in Bern. I worked with 3 different dentists. And so sort of a day here, 2 days there. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I think it really shaped a lot of my life in terms of living up to my desire to travel, and also being in Central Europe so I could get around Europe really well and see a lot and enjoy it. It was also just a great chance to learn about all aspects of culture, you know, the food and the languages and people and traditions and so forth. So, and then I came back. My mother.
So why did you leave? Why did you leave lovely Switzerland?
My mother had cancer, and I decided it was time to come home. You know, Tim, it was also almost a feeling that 3-year time was where you either said, I'm staying or I'm leaving. And I don't know if you felt some of that when you were living in the Geneva area, but it was sort of like, boy, I'm either going to put all the way in or I'm heading home. And with my mother's cancer, I said, I'm going home. So came back, and then I was working with my dad and my cousin in my little hometown. And then I met Greg, and Greg lured me to California. And I've been here ever since. I always say love made me do it. So now we live just about 40 minutes north of San Francisco. And it's a nice place to live. I like it here.
So have you always essentially lived in that area since you came back?
Yes.
Okay. So then you were in practice in Bern. You went back to the States, and then did you start up dental in a practice in, or as you guys call it, an office in California?
Yeah, I found jobs out here, and it was a whole different climate. My job in Switzerland was already secured for me before I went there. Then, of course, when I went back to work with my dad and my cousin, that was a pretty easy flow. But coming out here was a really different feeling. There were a lot more production oriented, and I didn't feel some of the closeness. I think that's the difference from the Midwest to the West Coast also. And so in 1985, I decided to start my employment agency.
Before you go on to your employment agency, I just want to talk to you about how you found the difference in clinical practice in Switzerland compared generally to the States. How did that differ?
Boy, I was the second hygienist in the three practices I worked in. So they were not used to having their teeth cleaned. The patients, I was so booked up, I couldn't hope to have a 6-month recall anyway. And to do any kind of periodontal treatment, there were no other appointment openings. And everybody knew it was the Americans that did this, or perhaps the Scandinavians, but we became known as, you know, the hygienists. And so some people like to come so they could practice English. I remember one time I had a patient come in and I just shoved up on his premolar. It was so wiggly. And I thought, they told me I couldn't extract a tooth. They told me I couldn't do it. So then I just ran the Cavitron around it and I took my finger away and I went, okay, it's still there, next. And he came back in, I don't know, some couple months later. And I said, well, how's everything been? And he goes, just one problem. He reached in his pocket and pulled out the tooth. It just fallen out. And the socket was completely epithelialized. It was healthy and everything. I think it was held in by calculus.
Yeah.
And so when I was getting in the beginning, and I was a recent grad, so I wanted to teach the world to floss and brush, and they called a little meeting and said, you know, we want to talk to you about this. Not too much of that, just that you could start with, you know, doing the teeth cleaning and then the polishing, and then if you have any leftover time. And it was like, are you kidding me? These people are 40, 50, 60 years old and they've never ever had a prophylaxis. Yeah. I mean, I one time I was trying to surgically with my Cavitron remove what I thought would be the world's largest single piece of calculus. It was a whole bridge over it had separated the anteriors and just like a lava flow over. And I was like, surgery on it with my Cavitron, and then the whole thing broke. So I don't have that. And so working with people that really did not have much of an idea about what a dental hygienist or a hygienist can do. Yeah. Gotcha. And
what about language? Did you learn Swiss German?
It was awkward because everybody said we should learn the written German, Hochdeutsch. And then people would come in and they'd say, oh, how long have you been here, Fraulein? And I'd say, well, I've been here a year, 2 years, whatever. And then they would say, oh, then you speak Swiss German. You're like one of us. And it was very awkward because it meant that they wanted to welcome me and wanted me to belong. And yet then I had this whole mismatch of language, because half of the time I'd speak High German and half the time I would throw in Swiss German and I wouldn't even know it. And I remember one time my boss was changing the light bulb and he took it out and it was hot and and I said, oh, Champar heiß. And they started laughing. The dental assistant was there. And I felt so ashamed. I thought, now what have I done wrong? And they said, well, we think it's so cute when you speak Swiss German. And it was like, well, what did I say that was Swiss German? And Champar is one of their words for very. And so that was actually really difficult. And it really drove it home after I left my position in Switzerland. I was traveling through Europe and I was down in Delphi, and we got this free trip, but it was a German speaking tour out to Delphi. And it was like, my friend and I said, why the heck not? And so, yeah, I'm talking to people in German on the trip, and it wasn't until the end of the day, people said, you know, which part of Switzerland are you from?
Mm.
I was like, why would you say that? I'm speaking American English to my girlfriend here. And they said, oh, your accent.
That's
And I
impressive.
realized my accent was decidedly Swiss German.
Wow. I mean, I'm
So.
half German and I don't understand Swiss German.
You got to listen to the other half.
That's right.
No, it is very, very different, and they are actually really proud of how different it is. And it's a different cadence, it's a different accent.
Mm.
It's very different, as you know. And so that was actually a difficult part. Switzerland is not the best place to go to learn a foreign language.
Yeah.
And people love to come in and see the American hygienist and speak English. And I remember one time I was kind of feeling a little grumpy that day or something. I thought, oh, why do you think I'm here? I'm here to learn a language too. You know, you want to go learn a language, come to America. And so I said something really quickly to him in German, sort of, you know, hi, how are you? You know, and he started looking at me and he said, I think I like you more in German. There was a different personality for him. And I thought, that's okay. Yeah. And so it was one of the best things. I learned about art. I learned about history and so many things. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Yeah. So you went, so then back to the States, in practice in the States. And then, so what made you leave clinical practice? How did that happen?
Well, I never thought I would. I thought I was sort of the hygienist, and I love dental hygiene. I started being a dental assistant with my dad when I was 11 years old. I was just loved all that stuff. And the atmosphere here in California was more dog eat dog. It was production oriented. And there were many ways I just did not feel empowered. Mm-hmm. It was just a very different feeling, that it didn't feel collaborative anymore. And that's what I wanted. So Connie influenced me to try the agency. I thought, well, the worst thing that can happen is I'll get a better job than the one I have. And that was in '85, and I still have my agency. It's
wow,
my baby. Yeah.
So explain how that works. How does running an agency work?
I run my agency that I do not employ the hygienists. I refer them. I'm their agent, and the office pays them as an employee. I've seen it change so much over the years. Like since COVID, it's got a whole different flavor to it. And in the beginning, of course, that was different, that people weren't used to having temps and it wasn't very normal. And then it became more the norm. And then after AIDS and so forth, people were more hesitant to work. And so we had a slump in employment. We didn't have enough hygienists. So then the temping became really popular. And then, excuse me, then in '08, when we had that big crash, it really slowed down. So it's really had a lot of this over the years. Mm-hmm. For me, it's connecting with the personnel and feeling connected with the hygienist, that it's really been about, and helping them to empower themselves. So I feel like at a minimum, the agency gives them choices and they can do what they want with those choices and explore different jobs. If they want to be in a little different geographic area, something like that, it's nice. So it's been really fulfilling for me. And as I say, it's my baby.
So what advice would you give to somebody that was thinking of doing the same thing?
Absolutely do it. It teaches me something every day. And I learned a lot about accepting people, when I would recognize there's no one hygienist that's perfect in every office, and there's no office that's perfect for every hygienist. And so it really did become about that sort of matching and connecting.
So did you have, like, you went from nothing to having an agency and helping people find jobs and helping the job find a person. So how did you go from A to B? How did you go from having nothing to what happened?
Well, I was inspired by my good friend Connie, who was in Switzerland also, and she had started an agency in Massachusetts, and she said, here, this is how you do it. And so I was the temp. So somebody called up and said, we need a temp. I'd go, I'll be there. And that gave me a chance to get to know the offices, for them to get to know me. And then I could, as I got people interested in temping, then I could, you know, put them in instead of me. So I was making my income as a temp then instead of as a permanent hire.
So and that's quite a good strategy, because you're seeing all the practices as they really are.
Exactly.
And the personalities.
And it was, you know, I was making my income that way instead of as a permanent job. So I think I started it with like $3,000 and see the lawyer and do this and do that and get my contracts in place. And so it was something I could do without too much money. My girlfriend was a great mentor, and it taught me something every single day.
Brilliant. So, I mean, that's not all you do now. I mean, so how did you get involved in running continuing education courses?
Well, one of my colleagues always said I should be active in the Dental Hygiene Society. And I was like, no, I'm too busy. I don't need to do that. And he hounded me long enough that I finally said, okay. So I got on the board, and one thing led to another, but we started out doing a little 2-hour Thursday evening CE classes, and I was doing it with another hygienist. And we just wanted to make a bunch of changes. It was like, this doesn't really seem to work. The newsletter isn't timed with the events so that the advertising doesn't really coordinate. We'd like to try something bigger where we could do a deep dive into a subject instead of simply the 2 hours in the evening. We don't want to be in the back of a restaurant where it's smoky. We want to be looking at being healthy and representing that. So there were a lot of things we were looking to change, and it became really dynamic for us. It was Lori and I, and convincing the board to make some changes. And when they saw that the changes were successful, then we started mailing out the brochures, and we started going to someplace we thought was nicer and like where a dentist would go, and for a CE course. And then, so we started doing that. And then Jim is the name of this hygienist, and Jim was the one that was pushing me to do all these different things. And finally I said, well, I think we should get Trisha O'Hare. And he said, Trisha O'Hare? No, why not even the California Dental Hygiene Association gets Trisha O'Hare? And I thought, oh, screw that small thinking. I've just had it. And so I said, I'll do it. And I called up Trisha O'Hare because I had esteemed her so much. And by golly, as you well know, she's friendly and warm and welcoming, and said, oh, sure, I'd love to do that. And so we did it. And that was in October of 2000, I think. Wow. Maybe 2001, something. And so then fast forward a number of years. So I was doing CE courses like that. I liked interactive ones like hands-on with lasers, hands-on with Arrestin, that kind of thing. I liked something that had some grab to it, that wasn't just a review or 101 kind of thing.
So what I'm hearing is that your motivation for actually doing it was that you weren't happy with the status quo for CE courses in the first place, and you felt you could do a lot better, essentially.
Yeah. Let's improve it.
Good reason.
Let's make it better. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
No, you're welcome to do that, please. It's helpful. Yeah, it was like, no, let's make this more user-friendly and more successful on all levels. And we had bigger numbers of attendees. We could get better known speakers. I remember one time, for example, when the board looked at me and said, you want to pay the speaker how much as the, component? We don't spend that kind of money. I said, why wouldn't we? We're going to have the people there. We're going to make the profit. Let's share it. And let's respect how hard our colleagues have worked to become speakers and lead us. And at one point they said, well, we should pay them the same hourly rate we get as a clinical dental hygienist. And I just put my foot down. I said, there's no way. That's just not even something to consider. The time and energy a speaker puts into presenting and before and after is phenomenal. And people don't know that until they've done it. And I could feel that with these different people. And it was like, no, they need to be properly compensated.
So now you're
places I put my foot down.
Yeah. And now you're essentially got Susan Wingrove on board as well, and are running regular courses with Tricia and Susan.
Yeah, well, in 2010, I went to Career Fusion in Florida, and Beth Thompson and Shirley Gutowski and Deb Grant and Patty DeGangi all had that forward-thinking idea. And after the 2008 crash, my business had slowed down substantially, and I was sort of looking for that next thing and feeling a bit lost. And so I went to Career Fusion. I was actually there on a scholarship from Spry Clear.
Oh.
And went down there, and the keynote speaker was Tricia O'Hare. And so we reconnected over a glass of wine, if you can imagine that. And Tricia said, well, we should do it again. And I said, well, okay, let's do that. And that, as they say, was the beginning of that. And so we've been doing that since then. And then Susan Wingrove is also an O'Hare University grad, as you well know. And so she said, well, I'm looking for somebody to help me. And I said, okay, let's again, just jump. Don't look first. And so it's been the three of us, and we've really had a good time working together and bringing different aspects and prevention and treatment and forward-thinking ideas. I just heard an interesting one the other day, Tim. I was watching a master class with Yo-Yo Ma, and just a gentle person, and his whole warmth in sharing is so great. And he said, all traditions are the result of successful innovation. And I thought about that. I thought, you're right. We make something the norm after we've seen it be successful long enough. And so that's what I've enjoyed watching, is seeing how some different things might become norm. And the sublingual air polisher was one of those aids that I wanted us to use. The lasers, I'm not so keen on the Arrestin and Atrodox now, but they were very interesting when they came out. And just like when Klaus Lang was doing the chlorhexidine, that was so exciting to think that we had something like that in our toolbox. Yeah. So we've watched a lot of changes over our career, and it's fun to see something become, trusted and standard.
I think COVID had an interesting effect on the way that continuing education was delivered, didn't it? Certainly for you guys as well.
Huge. I think we can thank O'Hare University for being an online platform. Tricia was familiar with it, and so she said, well, let's just segue right into online. And I was like, felt like the doe in the headlights. We took a course, we learned some stuff, and now we're finding we're more effective in many ways because of it. And it's lovely to be in person with people. I didn't give myself credit for how much work that was to do the travel, to do the presentation 2 days in a row and so forth, and kind of gather and hold that room together in that way. And of course, is the plane going to be on time? Is the hotel going to be okay? Is the food going to meet people's needs, etc.? So now, pardon me?
Carbon footprint.
Yep. And so now it's like we offer front row seating, the coffee and tea of your choice. And I think people realize they really like it, that there are enough other options where they can go and be more communal if they're wanting that. Hygienists that are just watching something on their own, they're not necessarily going to mingle that much at a live in-person CE anyway. So I've watched our course evaluations as people will respond about how they felt about the online experience, and it just sort of like, didn't like it. Oh, it's okay. It's interesting. Well, oh yeah, no, I like it. I think this is what I want to do. Just watching it change over as people realize how convenient it can be. I laughed one day, I was talking to a hygienist in Seattle, and she said, oh, it starts at 5 a.m. on the Pacific time. And I said, it's really early. I said, but we're done by 11. And she said, I think that's too early for me. And I could hear her over the telephone, just like, wait, if I was going into Seattle to a course that started at 8, I would have to get up at the same time, pay a bridge fare, pay parking, worry about picking my kids up from school, et cetera, et cetera. She said, oh no, this is actually just right. And then she loved it. And so when people process it that way, they realize it fits their life more easily, and it's a lot more convenient in that regard.
Yeah, I think one negative thing that always seems to come back to us is that people don't like online education, but I don't think they actually appreciate it's not really the education, it's the way that you teach it. It's down to the teacher. You can teach well in any situation. If you're good enough to teach standing up, you can be good enough to teach online, but it's the way you deliver it is the key.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. And that's what they like. And we found interactive ways for people to feel engaged, and that they are getting their answers that they needed, and they're exploring the way they wanted. So yeah, it is how you do it and how well you connect. And it's even like this, I just feel this intimacy of here I am with you. And it's just sort of a one-on-one feeling. There could be 50 other people here. And yet I still have that same sense of it. And I remember one time when I saw Yo-Yo Ma in concert, and I felt like he was playing for me. It felt like his eyes locked with mine, and I thought, it's a complete auditorium, but here I feel that intimacy. And I think that that's the same thing people are finding with the online.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So finally, we're proud to have you as a graduate.
Thank you.
O'Hare University.
I'm proud as well.
So what advice would you give anybody that was thinking of doing a degree completion with O'Hare University?
Well, if they were doing like I was and dragging their feet, I recommend they come and see you under one roof, and you go, well, why don't you do it? And you don't realize that, Tim, but you were the one that really, I was sort of like, well, if he said it like that to me, why don't you do it? And then Tricia said, yeah, why don't you do it? Because I was telling her you said that, and I thought, it's time to just jump. And that's what we need to do, is just jump. And when I look back on many opportunities I've had, you just jump and see what comes, and something very innovative and inspirational will come. And I was afraid of looking stupid. Like, I haven't been in college in so many years. I don't remember how to study, and projecting on it that it was going to be different than it was, and not believing what you and Tricia told me. So for somebody that's considering it, I would say just jump and realize that there's a big net. You and Tricia and Linda and Daphne make a huge net for people to be caught by and feel safe. And then feel really proud of doing something new and different at any age.
Yeah, it's really kind of you to say that. Thank you. We're we get a lot of people procrastinating and putting it off and putting it off. And then when they do it, they think, oh, why didn't I start this earlier? I know.
It's the same thing. Yep. And so I think it is the don't procrastinate. I also was motivated by the fact that I did go to University of Michigan, and people assumed because I went to university that I had a bachelor's, and I didn't. And I was always kind of sliding on that. And I wasn't terribly proud of the fact that I appeared to have a bachelor's and I didn't. And I thought, I want to go and actually make that a reality and put that BS behind my name. So that sense of, yes, what motivated me also was I want that. I've always wanted that. And I didn't think a bachelor's made me a better clinician. And I still don't think it would. Obviously, it makes us more well-rounded, kind of opens the blinders to be more present. And that presence is what makes action and results.
Thank you. That's really well considered. So thank you very, very much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop recording.
Having a cuppa.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop.
Just having a cuppa with Tim.